Welcome back to In Response CDH. As always, I'm your host Albert, and I'm glad you can join us for another great Commander gameplay video. Today we have Joseph returning with his Elsha of the Infinite deck. This is not your standard Elsha build. All I know is it wants to make a lot of tokens and crew up vehicles to beat you down with. He keeps an opening hand with Elixir of Immortality, Peel from Reality, Whirlwind of Thought, Destroya, Perfect Lifeform, Rodan, Titan of Winged Fury, Sacred Foundry, and a Plateau. Next we have Jose, piloting Kess, Dissident Mage. Card draw is the name of the game in this build. He wants to cast tons of spells that allow his creatures to make a ton of tokens to swarm his opponents with. He starts off with Soul Ring, Opt, Faithless Looting, Miscast, Bond of Insight, Underground River, and an Island. Next we have our resident budget brew guru, Chris, and he brought with him Saskia the Unyielding. This is a human tribal deck. It is very combat based because Saskia wants you to get in for damage, while she deals damage to another one of your opponents. He keeps an Arcane Signet, Aura Shards, Anaphens of the Foremost, Species Specialist, Rootbound Crag, Temple Garden, and a Plains. And last but not least, I'll be playing my Kadena Slinking Sorcerer deck. This is just your run-of-the-mill budget morph deck. It's built around casting them for free and drawing from Kadena's trigger. I keep a very slow opener with Teferi's Ageless Insight, Death Mist Raptor, Whisperwood Elemental, Dawnglade Regent, Rejuvenating Springs, an Island, and a Forest. Before we get started, we would like to remind you, if you enjoy our content and would like to support the channel, consider becoming a patron. When you do, you're not only contributing to the channel's growth, but you're also being entered in our monthly giveaways, as well as receiving patron-only perks. All proceeds of our Patreon are reinvested back into the channel to bring you the best content possible. We would also like to thank our new sponsor, Dragon Shield. Hit the link in the description of this video to check out the best products out there to protect your cardboard. With that said, and the introductions out of the way, let's start the game. Chris wins the die roll and gets to go first. He starts the game by playing a tapped Jungle Shrine and passes. Joseph plays a Plateau. He then taps it and casts an Elixir of Immortality and passes. I draw for turn and play an untapped Rejuvenating Springs and pass. Jose plays an Underground River. He then taps it to cast a turn 1 Soul Ring and ends his turn. Chris starts turn 2 by shocking in a Temple Garden and dropping down to 38 in order to cast an Arcane Signet. Joseph then takes his turn and plays a tapped Sacred Foundry and passes to me. I just play a basic forest and pass to Jose. Jose starts by shocking in Steam Vents. He then taps it for red to cast a Faithless Looting, to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. He follows that up by tapping the Soul Ring to cast a Sky Diamond. After that, he ends his turn. Chris draws for turn and plays a Rootbound Crag as his land drop. He then taps out to cast an Aura Shards and ends his turn. Joseph draws for turn and drops a basic island on the field. He then taps 2 to cast a Sword of Hours. And with nothing else, he ends his turn. I continue my slow start by just playing a basic swamp and passing the turn. Jose draws and drops a Luxury Suite on the field. He then casts a Night's Whisperer to draw 2 and lose 2. After that, he taps out, taking 1 damage from the Underground River to cast Read the Bones, scrying 2, drawing 2, and forgetting to lose 2 life. Chris starts turn 4 by playing a basic swamp, and tapping 3 to cast Anaphens of the Foremost. As it enters, the Aura Shards will trigger, and Chris decides to blow up Joseph's Elixir of Immortality. Joseph draws for turn and misses his land drop. With nothing else, he passes to me. I play a Llanowar Waste, and then tap out to cast my commander, Kadena Slinking Sorcerer. I then drop my first morph for free with Kadena's ability and draw a card. With nothing else, I pass the turn. Jose plays a basic island. He then taps 2 to cast Expressive Iteration, which lets him look at the top 3 cards of his library, put 1 in his hand, 1 on the bottom of his library, and exile another. He exiles a Docent of Perfection and taps out to play it, losing 1 life from the Underground River. On his end step, Chris casts a Dire Tactics to exile the Docent of Perfection. Chris then draws for turn and plays an Exotic Orchard. He then taps forward to cast his commander, Saskia the Unyielding. As it enters, he chooses me with Saskia's ability, and the Aura Shards destroys Jose's Soul Ring. He then moves to combat and swings ᴍᴜᴜᴍ and Saskia at Joseph. Joseph can't block and takes 7 damage, which means I also take 7 thanks to Saskia. After that, he passes the turn. Joseph draws a card and misses yet another land drop. With nothing to play, he just passes to me. Unlike Joseph, I continue hitting my land drops. I then pay 4 mana to cast a Teferi's Ageless Insight. After that, I cast another morph for free with my commander. And this time, I get to draw 2 cards. After that, I move to combat and swing Kadena at Jose, dealing 3 commander damage. Jose draws a card for turn. He then casts Anticipate on his main phase to look at the top 3 cards of his library, and puts 1 of those cards in his hand and the rest on the bottom of his library. He follows that up by casting a Painful Lesson to draw 2 more cards and lose 2 life. He finds a Blood Crypt and puts it into play tapped. After that, he ends his turn. Chris starts turn 6 by playing a Sunpetal Grove as his land drop. He then taps 4 to cast a Species Specialist. As it enters, he chooses to blow up my Teferi's Ageless Insight with the Aura Shards trigger. After that, he moves to combat and swings Saskia and ᴍᴜᴜᴍ at Jose for another 7. Which means I also get to take another 7 damage. Joseph draws for turn and doesn't find a land, but does find a Jeskai banner he can play. On his end step, I lose 1 life from the Llanowar Waste to cast a Worldly Tutor, to search up a creature to the top of my library. I move to my turn and draw that card. I then cast another morph creature for free and draw another card. I then move to combat and swing 2 morphs at Joseph and my commander at Jose. On my second main phase, I tap out to flip the morph face up to reveal a Chrome Shell Crab. When it turns face up, I exchange it for Chris's commander and end my turn. Jose takes his turn, missing his land drop, and only casts a Rakdos Signet and passes. Chris plays a basic Plains as his land for turn. He then taps 4 to cast a Fireflux Squad. As it enters, he destroys Jose's Sky Diamond with the Aura Shards. He then moves to combat and swings 2 creatures each at Jose and Joseph. But as the Fireflux Squad attacks, he chooses to exile my Chrome Shell Crab. When he does, he reveals cards from the top of his library until he finds a creature, which is a Sigarda, Champion of Light. Before damage, Jose casts Power Word Kill to deal with ᴍᴜᴜᴍ. Chris then remembers ᴍᴜᴜᴜ's trigger and puts a +1/+1 counter on the Species Specialist. They then go to damage. Joseph takes 9 and Jose takes 4. After that, he ends his turn. Joseph draws for turn and again misses a land drop, but does have enough to cast a Whirlwind of Thought. I then start my turn, draw a card, and play another morph for free, drawing another card with Kadena. After that, I cast a Growth Spiral on my main phase to draw another card, but fail to find another land. I choose to skip combat so I don't deal damage to myself with Saskia and end my turn. But on my end step, Jose casts a Thrill of Possibility, discarding a counterspell and drawing 2 more cards. He then moves to his turn and draws. After that, he taps 4 mana using his Signet to cast his commander, Kess, Dissident Mage. He uses her ability to cast Read the Bones from the graveyard, scrying both cards to the bottom of his library and drawing 2. I make sure he remembers to take the damage this time, and he then moves to his end step and has to discard down to 7. Chris draws his card and casts Iroas, God of Victory, on his main phase. He then moves to combat and swings Sigarda and Fire Flux at me, and the species specialist at Joseph. After that, he ends his turn. Joseph draws for turn and again misses his land drop. He then fires off a Ritual of Hope for no value other than to cycle it and draw a card with the Whirlwind of Thought. He still doesn't find a land and has to discard down to 7. I start my turn drawing a card. I then pay 2 to cast a Secret Plans and choose to pass the turn, leaving up some mana. Jose starts his turn by casting a Thrill of Possibility from the graveyard, discarding a Preordain, and I start to question what he's doing. Okay, so you draw a lot of cards, but what do you draw into?
I was looking for a creature that makes creatures. Like, I had one, and I was like, cool, I'm good because I have one.
He goes to combat and swings at Chris.
Ow. Here, I mean, you got 3.
You got me. You got me.
Last turn.
Chris starts his turn off by paying 4 mana to cast Riders of Gavony. As it enters, he names Secret Plans to be destroyed with Aura Shards. In response, I pay the cost to Megamorph my Kadena's Silencer to counter the triggered abilities of Aura Shards and Riders of Gavony. Since I morphed a creature, I get to draw a card off their Secret Plans. He then moves to combat and swings Fire Flux at Joseph, Sigarda at Jose, and Iroas at me. Sigarda's attack trigger goes off, and he finds Gisa, Glorious Resurrector, to put into his hand. Before we go to blockers, Joseph casts Fierce Retribution to destroy the Fireflux squad. We finally go to blocks, and I double block Iroas, and Jose takes 4 damage. Since 2 humans died, Species Specialist allows Chris to draw 2 cards. He finds and plays a land before passing the turn. Joseph draws for turn, and casts a Lion's Eye Diamond. Since his hand isn't helping him very much, he chooses to crack the LED and discard his hand to make 3 red mana to cast his commander, Elsha of the Infinite. Joseph gets a little happy with what he finds on top of his library, which is a war room, and he plays it. Elsha doesn't allow you to play lands off the top of your library, but nobody seemed to catch it. I start by playing another island, and then go straight to combat.
Oh, Albert's swinging now. No!
Chris taps the rest of his mana to cast Settle the Wreckage, but before I can even respond, Jose counters it with a mana drain. Chris then blocks Kadena with a Species Specialist, killing her off, and he takes 4 damage. On my second main phase, I cast Toxic Deluge, paying 5 life to wipe the board. Since 3 humans died, Chris gets to draw 3 cards from the Species Specialist. With nothing else, I ship the turn. Jose then uses the 4 mana from the mana drain to help pay for an overloaded Mizzix Mastery. In response, I cast a Void Slime to counter it, but Jose is ready for it with a Disallow. The Mizzix Mastery then resolves, and Jose lines up all the spells in order in which they will be cast. He starts with the Opt to scry and draw a card. Next, a Preordain to scry 2 and draw a card. Then Anticipate to look at 3 more and choose 1 to go to his hand. An Expressive Iteration to look at 3 more cards and do some more things. Then a Night's Whisper to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. After that, he casts a Faithless Looting and draws 2 more cards and discards 2 cards. He chooses to skip the Painful Lessons so he won't lose any more life. And finally, he casts a Bond of Insight to mill the top 4 of everyone's library, and he returns a Force of Will and a Mana Drain to his hand, and casts a Young Pyromancer. After that, he ends his turn. Chris plays a basic Forest as his land drop. He then taps it and casts a Soul Ring. After that, he casts a Dranith Magistrate to keep the rest of us from casting our commanders. As it enters, he blows up my Secret Plans with the Aura Shards. He follows that up by casting Gisa, Glorious Resurrector, and this time blows up Jose's Rakdos Signet. After that, he casts a Pitiless Plunderer.
It's fine, you can shoot it.
Yeah, it's gotta be the Whirlwind.
Gutter Snipe.
Tough game.
Tough game. I'm done. I'm gonna watch out, you guys. I got a 2-2.
No, I'm not. Force a little, not super.
Damn!
man.
Just 8? No, I'm joking.
I know.
That kills me.
How?
That kills me.
No.
Another snipe?
I don't have a hand.
Damage to everybody.
What? With what hand?
Oh, that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
That was straight up his blocker.
I know.
On my turn, I cast a Thieving Amalgam, but with nothing else, I end my turn. On Jose's upkeep, I manifest his top card with the Amalgam. He then draws for turn and casts Talran, Sky Summoner. Chris starts his turn and I manifest the top card of his library, and then he draws for turn. And Joseph still can't get over his last play.
Forced to build my gutter snipe.
Yeah.
Chris then casts a Captivating Crew, but Jose counters it with an Arcane Denial, which also allows him to make an Elemental and a Drake. After that, Chris recasts his commander, Saskia, which is again met by a counter from Jose. With no further plays, he passes to Joseph. I then manifest the top card of Joseph's library. He then draws for turn, and still can't find anything useful off the top of his deck. He then pays 3 life to draw a card with the War Room, and passes the turn. I draw for turn and cast a Dawnglade Regent. I then become the Monarch and draw at the end of my turn. I again manifest the top card of Jose's library, and he draws a card. He then spends the Mana Drain mana to help cast the Locust God, and follows that up by casting a See the Truth. This makes him a few more tokens. He then moves to combat and swings a Drake at me to become the Monarch. On his end step, he draws a card and makes an Insect. I forget to manifest Chris's top card, so he starts his turn playing a Command Tower. He then recasts his commander again.
If I let it go, dude, I'm dead. So let's choose a man.
No, don't worry. There's only one artifact and enchantment. It's my Jessica's banner.
Chris is such a nice guy though, he allows Joseph to keep his Mana Rock, but he does name Jose with the Saskia. He then moves into combat, swinging 3 of his creatures at Joseph. In response, Jose activates the Locust God to try and draw an answer, but he doesn't find one. Joseph takes 8 damage, and so does Jose from Saskia, knocking him out of the game. Chris then casts a Combat Celebrant on his second main phase, and passes. Joseph draws for turn, and finds a Tundra. He then taps 3 and floats a red mana from the banner, to cast Chaos Warp on his own permanent, hoping to hit something spicy off the top, but unfortunately for him, he doesn't find anything playable on top, so he just ends his turn. I untap and draw. I play a Flooded Grove as my land drop, and pay 5 for a Whisperwood Elemental, forgetting to manifest on my end step because I'm a terrible Magic player. However, I do remember to manifest the top card of Chris's library, and I finally remember that I was supposed to manifest the top card of my library, and do so. Chris then starts off by casting Abundance, and Joseph has a request.
You wanna, like, put me down?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
He then moves to combat and swings his Exerted Celebrant at Joseph. His commander and Gisa at me, I block both with 2 manifested cards that belong to Joseph, since I'm gonna lose them anyways. And Joseph takes 4, knocking him out of the game. On his second attack phase, he attacks me with Saskia, and I just throw another manifest in front of it, killing her off. Since the manifest Chris controlled died, Thieving Amalgam drains him for 2 life, and I gain 2 life. After that, Chris cycles away in Ash Barrens for a mountain. He then plays Ao, the Dawn Sky, but instead, he decides to use Abundance and chooses non-land, revealing a Guardian project. I start my turn by playing a Morph creature, followed by a Mana Crypt. I then cast a Lifecrafter's Bestiary, and just move to combat, swinging my Dawnglade Regent at Chris, who immediately snap blocks it with Ao. When Ao dies, he chooses the top mode, allowing him to look at the top 7 of his deck and grab an Esper Sentinel and a Kambal, Console of Allocation. Since 2 creatures come into play, the Aura Shards blows up both my artifacts. I then move to my end step and manifest the top card of my library. I then manifest the top card of Chris's library. Chris chooses not to draw, and instead chooses non-land with Abundance. He then finds the Massacre Girl on top and goes to cast the Massacre Girl. But I counter it with the Frilled Mystic. After that, he casts Saskia yet again, this time choosing me. He decides not to go to combat and uses Abundance on his end step. Rather than drawing a card from being the Monarch, he finds a Heroic Intervention and puts it in his hand. I draw for turn, but decide to play nothing and leave up all my mana, forgetting to manifest on my end step from the Whisperwood Elemental. Turn 15 starts the same way, with me manifesting and him replacing the draw with Abundance. This time he finds an Eternal Witness. He then casts the Eternal Witness to get back the Massacre Girl from the graveyard. After that, Chris casts Guardian Project, followed by Patriarch's Bidding, to return all his humans back from the graveyard to the battlefield. I choose to return a couple wizards into play, and at this point he's just toying with me. When the Riders of Gavony enter the battlefield, he chooses to give his humans protection from wizards. He then moves to combat and swings a buttload of creatures at me. I do my best to stay alive by blocking what I can. Me, being the stubborn ass that I am, cast Night's Whisper to draw 2 and lose 2, but with Kambal on the field, I lose another 2 and drop down to 1. Seeing no way to win from this position and refusing to let Chris finish me off, I pay 1 life to use my Llanowar Waste and kill myself. Congratulations, Chris, on getting another win on the channel. This was an extremely long game and probably the longest game we've played since we started the channel, but Chris was able to grind it out because his deck didn't seem to ever run out of gas. That Aura Shard stuck around the entire game, allowing him to freely pick off everyone's mana rocks, which helped keep him way ahead of the table. In the end, we were just unable to find enough answers to deal with his countless amounts of threats his deck was churning out. Joseph, on the other hand, was a no-show this game. His deck was not cooperating with him at all. Missing so many land drops early on in the game pretty much sealed his fate. Hopefully next time we see a better showing out of his deck, because I still have no idea what it does. Jose's deck is built to draw tons of cards and create a ton of tokens. Unfortunately, he didn't find any of his token producers until late in the game. By the time he found them, he was only 1 hit away from dying to Saskia. He did manage to find a few counters to try and slow Chris down, but it was too little, too late. I, on the other hand, was trying my hardest to keep up with Chris, but the morph creatures I found were not very helpful at all. And besides the 1 Toxic Deluge, I was unable to find any answers to help the table. Kadena is a fun deck to play, but really needs some more morph support to make it a bit more competitive. But who knows when we'll be seeing that mechanic come back to Magic. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Make sure to like the video and leave a comment, and if you aren't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Before we go, we'd like to give a big thank you to our amazing patrons. We are glad to have your support and thankful for each and every one of you. We here at In Response would like to thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure you follow us on our social medias. We also stream every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you for watching. Have an awesome day.